In this lesson, we're looking at trig ratios in the unit circle. It is the third lesson in Unit 8, and it begins on day 5, and it's a one-day lesson. And you can see that here in the big picture. Then in the scope and sequence, and remember you have a scope and sequence for every lesson, it gives us a course of study numbers that it covers, and it's 21 and 34. There's always a teacher note, and it gives you the prerequisite skills they need to have completed a unit circle and be familiar with the trig ratios from the right triangle. And they will probably want a completed right triangle available while they're working on this lesson. And then it gives you a presentation strategy. In this lesson, you're going to work the first half of worksheet, whole class, with the students answering questions, and then you'll work a few examples on the problems 1 through 20, and then let them finish. So let's look at this, and it begins with every triangle in the unit circle has a hypotenuse of 1 and a base length of x and a height of y. So let's look at this triangle. So we have a hypotenuse of 1, we have a base length of x, and a hypotenuse of y. And this is our angle at the origin, okay? So think about your trig functions, and you can remind the kids about SOHCAHTOA. And if they're looking at sine of theta, sine, they know from SOHCAHTOA, is opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite over hypotenuse would be y over 1. Well, if we're looking at it in the unit circle, it's just y. Because actually this is going to be, you know, we can put y over 1 here, or we could put opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, but in the unit circle it's y. So cosine of theta is x over 1 because it's adjacent over hypotenuse. So you could even put adjacent over hypotenuse here. And in the unit circle it's simply x. Well, tangent of theta is opposite over adjacent, so it's y over x, or we can say opposite over adjacent. So in the unit circle, it's going to be y over x. Well, remember, cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, so this would be 1 over y. So this is 1 over y. Or this could be hypotenuse over opposite. Okay, secant is going to be 1 over x. Oops, I wrote this wrong. It should be 1 over y. Or hypotenuse over adjacent. And cotangent is x over y, or we could say adjacent over opposite. So in the unit circle is x over y. So we're going to concentrate on sine, cosine, and tangent, and we're going to remember that in the unit circle, sine of theta is y, cosine of theta is x, and tangent of theta is y over x. So I've got a completed unit circle here. If we look at number 1, it says 150 degrees. Okay, we know that 150 degrees is here. Okay, and it says cosine of 150 degrees. So cosine of 150 degrees is the x value. So our answer is negative square root of 3 over 2. Now, we're not using a calculator on any of these. We are simply using the unit circle and everything has to be exact values. So if I look at number 5, it says cosine of 3/2 pi. Okay, so 3/2 pi is the same as 1.5 pi, or you can look at it here, 3 pi over 2. So it can be written this way, or it can be written this way. Well, here it is, and we want cosine again is the x value, so it is simply 0. If we look at number 9, it says tangent of pi over 3. Well, here's pi over 3. Tangent is y over x, so we have root 3 over 2 over 1/2. So this is divided by. So if I'm dividing fractions, I multiply by the reciprocal. These divide out, and I have the square root of 3. So tangent of pi over 3 equals the square root of 3. Now, the only other thing I wanted to comment on this is if we have a negative, like number 12, says cosine of negative pi over 4. Start at 0. Pi over 4 is this way. That's positive, so we're going to go the same distance this way. 7 pi over 4 is the same as negative pi over 4. And if I'm doing cosine, I'm doing the x value, so it equals root 2 over 2. And if we had something like, let's look at 18. It's tangent of 5 pi. So that's bigger than a unit circle because a unit circle is 2 pi. So let's look at it. We go 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi, 5 pi. So 5 pi and pi are the same. They're coterminal angles. And so if we're doing tangent, it's y over x, 0 divided by -1, which equals 0. So when you finish this lesson, you will upload to the Google slide in Canvas the problems that you have been assigned.